If you feel like something's off and you can't fully be yourself in business, it might be because the external world is completely suffocating you, your life, and your business. So if you want to fix that, well, keep listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the external world influencing and suffocating you, your business, and your life. So this may be a shorter episode because it is a very simple concept, but is a concept that most people are not aware of. And this is something that we talk heavily inside of our programs about. And, this probably, if you've been a listener for a while, this might not be something that is new to you. You may have heard me say it before, but keep in mind there's a difference between knowledge and knowing. And you may have heard this before and be like, oh, I know it, but you don't really know it if you're still suffering and being suffocated by the external world. And let me just explain what this is. Basically, we all have different belief systems. A lot of the times we have a lot of beliefs that we don't even realize are beliefs. And we talk pretty extensively about this inside of the Video Forex Effect. We talk about, and essentially the way the process works, because the way our mind works, the way our subconscious works, is that the subconscious mind will automate a lot of things inside of our head, and we start to form our version of reality based off of different indoctrinations. And so this may appears in so many different ways. And this might be like you had an experience, and that experience taught you something, and then the mind automatically automated it. So again, if you failed, webinars 5 times, you might start to form a belief that webinars don't work, or that, you're not great with webinars, or, something along those lines. Or maybe you were picked on as a kid, and the subconscious mind automatically automated this belief that you're not strong, or you're weak, or you're not worthy, or, a lot of things like that. And this happens in so many different ways. Experiences are one of those ways. Another way in which, these, I call them structures. These structures will be created inside of our life is also through what our parents tell us, what authorities tell us, what teachers tell us, what the masses are doing. Like if the masses are all doing something, the mind automatically goes, okay, well, that might be the normal, the right way to do things. We get indoctrinated into that. And again, there's no way of stopping it. It happens all the time, but there is a process in which you can start to pull apart the beliefs versus reality. Because what happens is when these things get automated inside of our head, the mind tells you that's just the way it is, and that becomes the version of reality for you. And there's no separation between beliefs and reality. So again, if you fail at webinars 5 times, the subconscious mind, without your awareness, just automatically goes and says, okay, you're not great at webinars. So then you move forward in business, you move forward in life with the reality that I'm not good at webinars, and you never question it. In fact, you didn't even know it was automated. It appeared as a feeling. And in fact, you're doing it right now. When you listen to this podcast episode, your subconscious mind is already going, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Do I like it? Is it entertaining? No, you get a feeling coming up inside of you about even this podcast episode. And then if you don't question that feeling, it will be automated into your mind, and you will leave today's episode, and whatever you felt this episode happened on this episode will be the lens in which you see the world. And again, we can't stop it. I don't want you to stop it. It's impossible to stop that from happening. But what we can do is we can begin to recognize, here is the thing that is stopping me from having internal peace, internal freedom. This is the thing that's stopping me from seeing results. And we can start to separate the meaning you gave things from reality. So for example, if you were that person who failed at webinars 5 times, and you start realizing, okay, I have this belief that I suck at webinars. I don't know where it came from. oh, you know what? I failed at webinars 5 times and I just automatically just assumed that I was not great at webinars. But I just saw Bobby over here fail at webinars 15 times and now he's crushing with webinars. So maybe I need to do that more. What we start to do is we start to unravel that belief. We start to separate that belief from reality. And what you're really doing is you're separating, or you're stopping the external world from influencing you, your decisions, your success. You're able to operate with full power. And one of the reasons why a lot of people don't have internal peace, they don't have the business that they want. They're stuck in jobs that they don't like. They're not going after their dreams full force. They're not investing in themselves to the levels that they want. A lot of that stuff, or they don't have the message that they want or the content that they want. They're not saying the things they want inside their brand, is because they're letting the external world influence them. And when we let the external world influence us, it will literally suffocate your happiness. It'll suffocate you. It'll suffocate your business. It'll suffocate your life. It'll suffocate your messaging, if I didn't say that one already. And the way I look at this and the way I kind of fell into this is I just imagined like, hey, if I was plopped in the middle of a forest with no one else around me, what would I do? What would I think? What would I say? What are a lot of the beliefs that I have exist today? Would I be wearing the same clothes? Like if I could live in this world with no other humans around, what would I be doing? And what would I be saying? And what would I be standing for? And when you start to ask yourselves those questions, if no one else was around, what would I do? If no one else was around, what move would I make in my business? If I wasn't told it was normal to, live in a house and not move in with my in-laws, what would I do? Because all of those things are external factors and influence your internal decision making. And that, again, will suffocate your life and your business. So a lot of us as business owners, especially in the online space, have been told this is what you should say, this is what you shouldn't say, this is going to get haters, haters are bad. This is what normal is, this is what not normal is, this is the way to do things, this is not the way to do things. When in fact, all of those, again, are that external world influencing your internal decision making. So here's a couple examples of ways that in which the external is influencing the internal. Again, if you're doing something for external validation, so you're doing things because your parents want you to do it, or you're going to get some kind of response from someone if you do something a certain way, you're not going to stand up for yourself because you want to get some kind of validation from someone. That's the external world influencing your internal decisions. And it literally will suffocate your happiness because you're not being you. You're not doing the things that you want to do. You're not doing the things that you need to do in order to see the results that you want. Again, parent pleasing, people pleasing, spouse pleasing, again, taking actions to get a certain type of response from someone else is letting them control you, right? And we don't want to do that. And trust me, it's not as easy. Like I deal with this every single day of my life as well, but I've been able to over time separate my beliefs from reality, one belief at a time. And over time, I get to experience more expansion. I get to take off the weight of the external world a little bit more every time, a little bit less suffocating. If I'm doing what everyone else wants me to do other than what I want to do, that's the external world controlling my internal environment. And I think as business owners, this one is really important because sometimes I've seen business owners take actions or give actions or assignments or structure their teams in certain ways based off the response of their team. Right? Like, I'm not going to do that because I know Susie, who runs our social media, isn't going to like it. She's going to get upset, blah, 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 blah. So you let Susie, an external factor, influence the internal thing that you need to do inside of your business to see better results. Another thing that when it comes to content and messaging, another thing that I see all the time is I see, especially with us, when we tell people to like take a stand for something, like stand out because you stand for something, a lot of Forexers, and we have to correct this with them, a lot of Forexers will actually start going after their pet peeves and they'll be standing against their pet peeves. But what they don't realize in that moment is they're letting their pet peeves literally control and dictate their message. And that's letting the external world control your message. So for example of that, I saw someone, a colleague in the space, hopefully they're not, well, hopefully they're not listening to the podcast episode, but I actually hope that they are so that they are aware of this going on. But they started doing a lot of TikToks in Reels based on things they didn't like inside of the online marketing space. So things like people charging high prices or, like people DMing pitches and stuff like that. Like stop DMing me your pitch and what not to do. And they're just like basically going after pet peeves. But the problem with that is you're letting everyone else's actions dictate your message. And before you know it, you don't have a platform. You don't have a foundation. You have a complaint center. And people that are going to be attracted to that type of content are the same type of people that want to complain about those things with you. Now, the difference between standing up for something versus pet peeves is when we stand up for something, we're not standing against something. So for example, when I talk about the content that we do, what I do is I take a stand for people saying what they want to say. I take a stand for people not always feeling like they have to do how-to content over and over and over again. I take the stand for people like standing out because of who they are, right? And you may look at that and go, well, Brandon, isn't you standing against how-to content kind of like a pet peeve? And it's like, no. I don't care if people go and do how-to content. That's not an issue. I have no issue with people going and doing how-to content. If you want to do how-to content, go and do it. I'm not saying that. What I have an issue with is people seeing and doing how-to content because they think it's normal and not seeing the results. I take a stand against people suffering from the result of how-to content over and over and over again. It's a difference. I'm not standing against how-to content. I'm standing against how-to content being the only answer is what I take a stand against. And I'm standing up for you creating what you want to create. Because a lot of people don't want to create how-to content. A lot of people want to create deeper, more impactful content. So it's a very slight, distinct difference, but is a very powerful one because if we let pet peeves and opinions and different things like that influence our message, well, then we have no message. We lose our personal power. And powerful people create powerful messages. Powerful people create powerful businesses. And if we're continually going to let the external world influence everything inside of our business, inside of our message, inside of our life, well, we start to give our personal power away to that. A lot of people will not say things because of haters, right? So a lot of people are giving their personal power away to haters. I'm not going to say this, or I'm not going to put this out there because this person might say this, or I might get haters on that. This person might over here. And what you're doing is you're giving your complete personal power back over to all of those people. Maybe we don't take the actions we want because we're afraid of what our parents are going to say. Maybe our parents have a structure in which the world operates and they want you to live within that structure. Like go to college, get a degree, work 9 to 5, retire after 40 years of doing that. That's what success is. You need to be a doctor. You need to go do all of that stuff. And the second you let any of that influence your actions and decisions about your life, you've already lost. You're already going to set yourself up from being out of alignment. You're going to set yourself up for continued, I don't even know what the right word would be, dissatisfaction, unhappiness. I mean, it could probably show up in a lot of different ways. And another way that people fall into this is they do what society tells them to do. There's such a lack of critical thinking in a lot of people. And a lack of critical thinking allows you just to do the same thing as everyone else. If your business isn't taking off, it's probably because you haven't shown people how you're unique or how you're different. You haven't been able to communicate that, show it through marketing, through your product. And usually that results because you're just doing the same thing that has always been done. You know, like if you own a coffee shop, you probably just do a coffee shop the same way that it's always been done with everyone else. You let society, let the norms dictate and control what you do. You don't think differently. You don't operate differently. You don't do marketing differently. You don't lean into doing things differently. You know, if you're a coffee shop, why not bring identity into it? And I talk about that all the time as well. Like, why not have a coffee shop for parents? Most people will be like, well, I'm going to like limit the amount of people that come in. It's like, no, you're going to get 100% of that one niche and people will be coming in all the time. But because you let society or what you think is going to happen control everything, you let external things control the different decisions. Another way this might show up is if you get angry because of the actions or the beliefs of other people. You're literally letting external things and other people completely control and dictate your emotions. And as business owners, this is very dangerous grounds to be walking and living. Because if we're going to let Bobby and Susie and this person on the internet that we never effing heard of before control our emotional state, literally what we're doing is we're letting them control the success of our business. Because if you're angry and you're upset and you're depressed and you're filled with worried and fear and anxiety because of what someone's going to say or a hater comment that you got or someone did something you don't believe in, you're going to get filled with all of that stuff. You're literally filling your entire body and energy up with the things that do not result in a successful business. I can guarantee you guys right now, you probably will never find a successful business owner that is constantly filled with fear, anxiety, worry, and anger. I mean, probably never. Like a self-made, successful person generally is usually optimistic, very happy. They look at failures not as failures, but at learning lessons. They see the world differently than most people, and they usually will not let the external world influence their internal emotional state. And again, this is not an easy thing. Like, you're not going to listen to this podcast and be like, okay, great, got it. Now everything's changed. Like, I still deal with this all the time. I still deal with this, but I would say the majority of my success came from when those things started to switch, when I stopped letting the external world on multiple levels dictate and control who I was, what I thought, what I did, and how I felt. Even what we wear is influenced by external things, you know? Yesterday, I was working from home. I had sweatpants on, a flannel, my hair was all over the place, and I had some weird looking like slipper things on, and I was going to go for a walk. My wife's like, "What are you doing? You look like a bum." And she, it's just, I didn't actually look like a bum per se, but just nothing matched. And I was like, yeah, I don't really care. I'm just going to go for a walk. Like, that's what I wanted to wear. I'm not going to let the norms of society influence the things that I'm going to do. Like, I didn't want to change. I didn't want to get changed. I just wanted to go for a walk. You know, I didn't really care. And again, a lot of this comes down from a lack of critical thinking. This comes from also a place of people just, a lot of us just don't know any better. Their beliefs seem real. So again, before I move on to the next part of this, is that we have to understand how this all works. So just to recap before we move on to the next piece, the way this works is we go through life and we are told things need to be a certain way. Sometimes we have an experience and we let that experience tell us, what's realistic and what's not realistic, what's right and what's wrong. There's different rules, and we let those rules dictate us, things that we hear from our parents, our friends, what we see the masses doing. Those all become things that usually what happen is they're observed through us. The mind will start to process it, start to give us a feeling. We'll start to feel, a certain way about it. And then that feeling becomes a reality. So something will happen. We give it meaning, essentially. So for example, you're listening to this podcast episode, 100 of you might be listening to this episode. There's going to be 100 different interpretations of this podcast episode. There's not going to be two people that are going to describe it perfectly, exactly the same, or give the exact same feedback on it. But the thing is, you didn't consciously make that decision. You didn't consciously go like, is it good? Is it bad? How is it good? How is it bad? You just start to feel it, right? And once you start to realize that, like, oh my gosh, this is nothing more than a belief, or wow, I was really influenced by this one thing, you get to reframe all of that. You start to give things a new meaning. And the example I always talk about is the one with my mom. Like, when I was building my business, I would go to my parents' house. I was living with my in-laws. I would go to my parents' house. And every day my mom would say, you should just go get a job. You should just go get a job. And I got very frustrated with that. I let my mom influence my internal feeling. And that wasn't a great place to operate and grow a business from. Like, when I'm constantly mad, upset, and angry, and feeling like my mom didn't believe in me, it's very difficult to build a successful business from that standpoint. And that's how I lived for years. Until one day I started to realize that, oh, wow, that was nothing more than a belief. I started to learn a lot of the information I'm giving you guys in this podcast episode. And I started to reframe it. I started to give it a different meaning. And that meaning I gave it was, you know what? My mom was doing it because she loves me. This is how she's protecting her child. It's not that she doesn't believe in me. She just has beliefs around what is safe and, you know, how to keep her kids safe and financially safe. And all she's trying to do is keep me safe. And that comes from a place of love. And when I looked at it through that perspective and I looked at it through that lens and I attached that meaning to it, I started to operate from a more powerful place. And a lot of this will start from, so the next question probably is like, okay, Brandon, like, how do we start to do this? How do we start to make sure we're not influenced by that external world so that we can craft really successful businesses, so we can craft really powerful messaging? And it does stem from remembering who you are and being clear on what you want. And what you want is more of from an internal fulfillment versus an external fulfillment. If you start making decisions because this is what you want and it fulfills you internally, then that's a step in the right direction. So what I mean by this is if I start to craft a business and I start to create a business and I want it to be successful. And I think that, like, okay, great. I have a skill teaching people how to do YouTube SEO. I'm going to go do YouTube SEO because that's what people need. That's what people want. I surveyed my audience. This is what people say that they want. So I'm going to go do that. Even though internally I don't want to do that, but I'm going to go build a business and do that anyways. And a lot of people will do that. A lot of people will start businesses or products or messages with that in mind. What's going to make me the most money? What do people want? What is this? Blah, 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 blah. And they're not passionate about it at all. And I do think passion can be developed. And we see that a lot of examples of that, but sometimes it never is. And people get stuck in that and then they won't change. And that was the decision I had to make at the end of 2017 when I was in that spot teaching YouTube SEO. I didn't want to do it anymore. I was not internally happy, but from the external world, that's what people knew me for. That's what people wanted from me. That's what was making me the money. I had so many external things telling me this is what you should be doing. But internally, alarm bells were going off saying this is not what you need to do. This is not what you should be doing. And I listened to that. The personal power to listen to that. Created the video 4X and 3 years later, multi-million-dollar business. And so we have to remember who we are. And this is something that I would say you want to incorporate with your kids and the future of the business. We want to remember who we are. It's the key to everything. Remembering who you are at the core level. What are your wants? What are your likes? What's your message? What is the service you want? What are your core values? What's the impact that you want to make? Regardless of what you think is realistic, what the external world tells you to do, what are you? Who are you? What are you? What do you want to say? What do you want to do? And there's a couple ways to get to that. And there's a couple of things that I focus on in order to do this. There's 4, in fact. And the first one is silence. And what I mean by silence is quieting the mind. Because when we start to think our way through this, our minds can only think from a place that it already knows, right? So from experience, from knowledge that we have. But when we silence the mind, it shuts off everything. It shuts off the external world. It shuts off what is realistic. It shuts off all of that stuff. And we all experience this when we journal and we can't, you're writing things down so fast and the ideas are just flowing and popping, but you're not thinking of those things. They're just gifted to you. That's the gift of what silence can bring. Silence allows you to remember who you are and stop letting the external influence everything. Now, the next one I haven't really talked about before, but this is what I call dissembling structures. And structures is basically how we make sense of everything. It's really like patterns in our life. So for example, if let's say you and your spouse just don't have a great relationship or you seem to be really rocky over the last couple of months, there's probably a structure in which you guys communicate. There's probably a pattern in which you communicate. There's a pattern in which you live your life. And this pattern can show up in a lot of different ways. This pattern can show up in the form of, I'm not going to say this because it's going to upset them, or I'm not going to express my feeling because that's going to upset them, which, by the way, those are all external things for you not taking action on what you want. You might have a pattern in how you behave. You might have a pattern in how things are done around the house, right? Those are all structures. Those are structures in which you guys live, in which you correspond and exist together. And most people never see them as structures. They just go, it's just the way it is. But as we start to break apart those structures, the dynamic between you starts to change. So if we start to break up the pattern of, I'm not going to, like, you might have a pattern of, I'm not going to say this because that's going to upset them, even though that's how I really feel. If we break that pattern, we break that structure, and that goes away, you know what starts happening is you start communicating how you really feel. And that will start to alter and shift the dynamic of the relationship between you and your spouse. Now, this idea plays out in every area of your life. There's dynamics in the way of your business and structures in your business of how it sits inside the marketplace, right? There's structures in which you have the way you operate with your team. You also have belief structures. You have structures that are beliefs that we talked about earlier today. You have structures around how the world operates, what is real, what is realistic, what's not realistic, what is right, what is wrong. Those are all structures that were created from the subconscious mind that you've developed by living a life on planet Earth. And those structures will literally control everything for you. But if you start to disassemble the structures that you've built up, you start to get different results inside of your life. So for me, one is sitting in silence and listening to those ideas. And when I have those ideas, sometimes it requires me disassembling some of the structures I have that want me to think, oh, that idea is not going to work. Because you have to have the personal power to take action on those things, but sometimes we can't take that personal power if we keep operating within a structure that we have inside of our heads. We have to explore those structures. Now, this really is the key to happiness. When we start silencing that external world, we start silencing the thinking mind, we live a life of expansion. And you really start to uncover a level of happiness, a dangerous level of happiness and freedom that you've never been able to explore, because you're not controlled by anything. Like, I'm not controlled by a lot of the stuff inside of society. Like, people tell you, you can't go travel in the middle of the week. Why not? You can't work 4 hours in a week and make $100,000 a year. Why not? Why? That's totally possible. That's a structure. People, like, we have friends, for example, they're like, I can't go out to dinner tonight with you guys because we have to be home with our kids. Why? Because they're going to cry. Okay, so why? What? They can't cry with a babysitter? No. Because of X, Y, and Z. That's a structure that literally controls their life. And then even if they left and went out to dinner and got rid of that structure, they're going to be filled with anxiety because there's another structure there as well. So one of the best things I've ever done for myself is to start getting rid of these structures inside of my life to find extreme amounts of happiness. And that really comes from a place of everything is possible. And in order to truly live and believe that anything's possible, you have to get rid of the structures inside of your life that tell you those things aren't possible. And then the last one, the fourth key, is full responsibility for everything. This one's sometimes hard to do all the time, but I do my best to make sure that I take full responsibility all the time. And it's something that I require from my team as well, is if a mistake was made inside of our team, the worst thing you can do is to blame it on something else other than you. Like, even if it was out of your control. If you scheduled something and the scheduling software shut down and didn't work, and you come to me and like, oh, I'm so sorry, like, the scheduling software, blah, 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 and you start, it doesn't matter. It's just come to me and go, my problem, I totally messed up, won't happen again. This is why it happened. We have a process in place to fix it now. We move on and we care about it. But the second that, and including myself, we don't take responsibility for our own actions, we set ourselves up to be at mercy for everything in this world. Because what starts to happen is when you don't get the results that you want in life, you start to blame everyone else but you. But the ironic thing is you're the only one that can change those things. If you're going to blame society, the niche, your students, your audience, your content on all of the reasons why you don't have the results, and you don't get back to you at some point, again, you're letting external things completely influence everything inside of your life. But when you take full responsibility, that is you internally saying, I am responsible for everything. That is an internal thing. And when we operate from that place, again, you're operating within full power. So the 4 things for me are silence, disassembling structures, understanding that key to happiness, which is remembering who you are, and living with full responsibility. Now, the reason why I want to do this on a podcast episode, and for those of you listeners who have been listening for a while, you probably understand a lot of this stuff. You probably heard me talk about it. Maybe you haven't heard it all in one place before. But the reason why I bring this up is I believe that the future of business and the future for our kids and the future for us is completely unwritten, and we're set up for a lot of change. And I hope you guys understand this. I hope you guys understand that the way that things have been done, the structure in which things have been done for the last 50 years, we still see a little bit of it still in place now, but it's not going to be here for much longer. And if you think you've seen a lot of change in the last 10, 15 years, just wait for the next 10 to 15 years. What I do for a living, how I've made millions of dollars in sales, literally was not an option 10 years ago, 12 years ago. It didn't exist. When I went to high school and I had to go sit down in front of a career counselor, what I do today did not exist then. And if you guys are going to be trapped by the external world, you're not going to be able to find the thing that you need to find. You're not going to be set up for success and happiness. You're not going to be flexible. You're not going to be fluid. And we need to teach our kids. We need to teach our kids these concepts. We need to teach the idea of what structures are, what silence is, what full responsibility is, what adaptability is. And not to be influenced by the external structures, because the external structures of what you need to do and how you should be and how things are, they're all going to start changing, and it's going to create a lot of chaos in the world for those of you who aren't operating from there. But at the same time, it's going to create a lot of opportunity. And to give you guys a couple examples, again, I don't know what the future is going to hold, what it's going to look like to a T. But this idea of going to school and having to get a degree and having to go to a 9-to-5 was not a structure that I adapted into my life. And because I didn't adapt that structure into my life, I'm able to create a business where if I want to go hiking for a couple hours in the morning, I can very easily do that. It created a life where if I want to go on vacation and work from the computer for like an hour in the morning, I can literally do that. It allowed me to create a business where if my employees wanted to take a 2-week long vacation and just kind of work as they're on vacation, they could do that. It allowed us to create a virtual business where we don't have an office anymore and my team can literally live anywhere they want. None of that stuff existed before. And had I kept operating within the old structure of the way things are supposed to be, I may have unhappy employees who are just doing it because it's a job versus employees that are passionate about this. And I think there's so many opportunities for the future there's so many opportunities in the direction we're going to create a lot more happiness in a lot of different ways, whether you be a business owner or whether you be an employee. And I think teaching our kids to look for this adaptability, to understand that there's responsibility, to understand that there might be ways that things are done now, but not to fall under that structure and to always be innovating and looking differently and critically thinking, will allow the future to be much brighter, happier, and see a lot more fulfilled people in the space. So again, we need that for our kids. We also need that for ourselves because, I'm telling you right now, the way things have been done for the last couple of years is going to continue to change. We have to be able to adapt, and we have to be able to dismantle those structures, and we have to be able to just understand how to be happy and be those powerful business owners. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, let us know by either tagging us at I am Brandon Lucero on Instagram, or just sending us a note or a post inside our Facebook group, the New Generation Entrepreneur Facebook group. And if you have not yet, please head over to iTunes, leave us a review. I would love to hear from you. So that's it. I'll see you guys on the next episode. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.